Welcome to the Community IT Innovators webinar series. My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I'm the president here at Community IT, and I'm very pleased to introduce today's webinar, Supporting Remote Workers. Today's webinar is going to be presented by our Director of Ongoing Support, Johanny Torrico, and our Senior Network Consultant, Abdul Musa. We could go to the next slide. So a couple tips on the webinar. Please ask questions. We have a great chat tool that comes with GoToWebinar, and you can use that to ask questions, and we try to answer the questions as best we can. We also encourage you to interact with us on Twitter. The hashtag for today's webinar is going to be remote work, hashtag remote work, and we respond to that. So if you have any comments or feedback or anything that really stands out to you, go ahead and tweet with that hashtag. Ask that you focus during the webinar, especially today's webinar. We're going to be covering a lot in just an hour, and if you don't pay attention, you may just miss the best part. And finally, we always get asked this, so I just want to let people know ahead of time. Both the PowerPoint is going to be available on SlideShare, and the webinar itself is going to be available on our YouTube channel. And we're going to have links to that on our website, and we'll also send that out as an email after the webinar. A little bit about Community IT. It is our mission to help nonprofits achieve their missions through the effective use of technology. And we do this with an approach that's strategic, collaborative, invested, and like I said, focuses on working with nonprofits and supporting their unique needs. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand this over to Johanny and Abdul. They can introduce themselves, and we can get the webinar started.
Hello, my name is Johanny Torrico. Thank you, Johan, for introducing us. I'm the Director of Ongoing Support, and I'm here with my colleague Abdul Musa, Senior Consultant, and he's going to start the presentation, and I will join him a little later. Welcome, Abdul.
Thank you, Johanny. As Johan said, we have a packed agenda, so we're gonna just jump right into it. So we're gonna cover for today. We're gonna cover scenarios for remote work, some benefits. The meat of the webinar is going to be on solutions, so some prerequisites for some solutions, advantages and disadvantages of various solutions. Then we're going to look at some risks and how to kind of manage those risks. Then we're going to review some best practices, and we're going to round up with looking at how you select a solution. So for the purposes of this webinar, we've kind of broken down remote work into 3 categories. So first category is just anyone who's working remotely from, the office. So whether it's full-time, a couple of times a week, or occasionally when they need to work on 1 or 2 tasks. So that's kind of the first category. So that's just someone who maybe works in a DC office of a nonprofit, and a couple of times a week works from home, or works on an as-needed basis. Then that's kind of first category. Second category is field office staff. So if, say, you have your main office in Maine, and you have a field office in, I don't know, New Hampshire, and you're trying to make sure those 2 offices collaborate and work together. So the staff, if the main office is the head office and the New Hampshire office is the field office, you want those 2 offices to collaborate and interact together. So that's the second category of remote work for the purpose of this webinar. And then the last category is virtual teams, and this is a scenario whereby, like, you have either small nonprofit or small business where, like, everyone works from separate offices, and they collaborate on various data, information system, etc. So for the purposes of this webinar, we're really looking at solutions for these categories, for these 3 categories. So next, we're going to examine the benefits of remote work. So why would you want to have a remote work solution for your organization? the number one reason is obviously staff satisfaction. According to a survey by ESNA Communications, which is a cloud collaboration firm, 64% of U.S. employees say they would sacrifice pay to work from home. So that tells you how much this is considered important for the modern employee. Next reason is flexibility, and for flexibility, we're really talking about it reduces restrictions on where and when you can work. It also allows for personal time for family needs such as doctor's visits, etc. So flexibility also is is a very important part. From the organizational perspective, it allows for working on different schedules and different time zones, etc. So it just gives you more flexibility to operate in different ways, and this flexibility has value. Next kind of major benefit is work-life balance. So having this flexibility I mentioned earlier allows for part-time work, personal time, things like that. It eliminates or at least reduces commute time in some instances. Also allows you to work during inclement weather, or if if you have a cold and you're not knocked out, but you can would make it so you could still do some work while you're still a little bit out under the weather. Then the next thing is productivity gains for the enterprise, for the organization. So in some cases, remote work gives one the ability to focus on projects without interruption, work when one is most productive, and then in the example of the field office, it increases collaboration between offices because you don't have to keep emailing the data back, checking in and checking out documents and that kind of thing. And then the next thing, it's from an HR perspective, it could be seen as a recruitment and retention tool. Recruitment, because potential candidates can see the benefit of having that flexibility that I mentioned earlier. And then in terms of retention, if some of your staff decide they want to move from your geographic to your organization. The next kind of benefit that one can get from having a remote work solution in the organization is a competitive advantage. So you might be able to start a new program or initiative that you probably might not have been able to before, either because it costs too much or having to either travel to another location, etc. Those things might kind of hinder the ability to start some new programs. So, and then with new technologies that are coming on, there might be a service that you're able to provide because of obviously cost benefit. I mean, this obviously depends on your implementation, but it could potentially reduce the need for office space and office equipment. It could also potentially reduce travel costs, having to visit clients, or having to go, if you're a direct service organization, having to go for some on-site visits. Some of these could be done maybe using some remote work tools. And then lastly, it's there are environmental benefits to having a remote work solution in your enterprise. Obviously less pollution from commuting and less power used in the office. So a couple of technological changes and organizational changes have made remote work possible. The first one is obviously the evolution of the internet. Most internet service providers have reduced costs compared to 5 or even 10 or 5 years ago, and the bandwidth is faster. So you're getting better bandwidth for fast at a lower price. Additionally, I mean, even more important is the increased adoption of internet usage. So in 2000, about 43.1% of the U.S. population was using the internet, but by 2012, that almost doubled to 81%. So that obviously has an impact. Additionally, the technologies that are, and the vendors and the services they provide that are available to actually do remote work has improved significantly. And then the last thing that's kind of enable this to kind of prosper, if you will, is the fact that organizations are more accepting of remote work. They see the benefit and they want to leverage on existing remote work solutions. So to kind of round up, kind of talking about benefits of remote work, I wanted to just share some statistics. So the global, according to the to ESNA, which is as I said, a cloud and communications collaboration vendor, from one of the surveys they've done, they found that from a global workforce of about 4.6 billion, 20% of the global workforce telecommutes, 29% partially commutes. That means either at least part of a day is spent working remotely from the office, and then 10% are able to work full-time remotely. The other kind of interesting kind of statistic here is the breakdown. So in the Asia and Pacific region, 12% say they do some form of remote work. In Europe, Middle East, and Africa, it's about 7%, and the Americas, that is about 5%. And then in the U.S., that number, these are the statistics for the U.S. So 1 in 4 U.S. workers work from home at least some of the time. 65% of U.S. employees report being more productive when they work at home. I mentioned this earlier, that 64% said they would sacrifice some part of their pay to work from home. And then lastly, between 2005 and 2011, telework in the U.S. has grown 73%. So we can see, how this is the landscape of remote work has changed over the years. So we're going to go into the solution section next, and I'm going to hand over to Johanny to take it from here. Thanks. Johanny, over to you.
Thanks, Abdul. Okay, so we have seen the benefits of working remotely. Now, what do we need to make it work? What does the end user needs to connect remotely? Of course, he needs some tools. What about the organization? The organization needs to open the environment for remote access. It needs to provide some communication tools. And then lastly, the organization needs to be able to support the remote workers. The end user. These are kind of four things or four categories, four areas where the end user will need some tools. It will need some hardware, applications or software. It will need some sort of internet connection so that he or she can connect to the organization. The user will need some telephony, and of course some remote access method or remote access technology to access the network resources. So more specifically, here are some quick examples. So in terms of hardware, the end user will need a workstation, either a laptop or a desktop. Some might argue that a tablet might be useful too, although I don't recommend that because it's a very limited functionality still for some of those, a small keyboard, small, stuff like that. So what else do you need in terms of hardware? You might need a printer, you might need a scanner. Definitely you want to have some good headsets, video and audio tools, monitors, speakers. In terms of applications, you need Office productivity, of course. The ones that we use the most is Microsoft Office, but there's some, there's some others out there. You might need enterprise applications. If you are an accountant, you're in the accounting department of fundraising, or the CRM, you will need, applications around those things. And then, of course, you will need, an antivirus, and you might need a connection software. We'll talk more about VPN, but some hardware-based or software-based VPNs need a client application to connect. In terms of connectivity, you need an internet connection, and you need to look out for the speed on those. You can either have a wire connection, use wireless, or there's some broadband cards out there too that can be useful. In terms of telephony, you need a phone, VoIP. It's very common these days, or a mobile phone. It can be also useful, especially if if your organization provides a VoIP phone and an application that kind of can mask the organization phone number. That can be very useful. And then lastly, your organization need to provide, again, remote access technologies, and the most common ones are VPN, remote services, and some cloud technologies. All right. So we talk about the end user. What about the organization? What do you need to provide your users? So let me start by saying, why do you want to allow for remote access? And some things, these are 3 things to keep in mind when you kind of explore the option of opening your environment for remote access. When you explore the options, you want to keep in mind that you want to facilitate communication. So, meaning that you want your remote users to be able to, use the phone, to use some chatting, enterprise chat and enterprise messaging tools. You want to facilitate collaboration, and there are a lot of tools out there. We can explore also those later. And at the end, you want to make sure that your users have a seamless experience. So if you have a user in Georgia and your headquarters are in DC, you want to be sure that your Georgia staff connects to your organization in a seamless manner. They have access to their files. They have access to almost all the same things that they will if they were working in DC. All right, so these are some of the tools that more or less your users are probably already taking advantage of. In terms of communication, you have Lync, which is they can use it for instant messaging, so chatting. You can use it for initiating a phone call or a video call. You can even host meetings with Lync, and that is part of Office 365. So, Skype, we're probably all familiar with Skype. GoToMeeting, it's another tool. It's a paid tool that you can use for meetings. And then, of course, there is email, and the 2 most used applications are probably Outlook Web Access and Gmail. In terms of collaboration, you probably already have users putting files in Box or Dropbox, or taking advantage of the Google Drive or the OneDrive, Office 365, and SharePoint. So all of these are collaboration tools out there that can actually be adopted by the enterprise at the enterprise level, so you can have a better control and management of those. And then these 2 on the management side. These 2 are good tools actually for project management, Trello and Basecamp. Okay, so let's jump to the remote access solutions. We're gonna explore the 3 different, or the most common actually, solutions out there: VPN, desktop sharing, and cloud. All right. So VPN. So what is a VPN? I'll give you a quick overview. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. It provides private connectivity through a public internet connection, and is usually referred to as a tunnel. So, so how does it work? The VPN uses 2 endpoints to encrypt and decrypt traffic. The endpoints share a key which serves as the encryption algorithm. It can be used to connect remote PCs to the central office, and so that's what I was talking earlier. If you have a hardware or a software or enhanced tunneling a VPN application, you might need to install that application on your the VPN client on your desktop in order for you to connect to your main office. If they have a VPN as a method of remote access, and then you also have the advantage here as a VPN to have a site-to-site VPN. So if your main office is located in DC and you're opening an office in Chicago, you actually with a VPN you can be able to join those two offices and kind of share network resources that way. And we can go over the pros and cons on the next slide. All right, so some of the pros for a VPN, it's a secure technology. Again, it uses encryption. It's been around for a while, so I would say it's very mature. It's scalable. So that means, again, if you have an office in Chicago, in Georgia, California, and DC, you can virtually join those offices and make it seamless for users to use the different network resources in your organization. And it can be, the deployment costs can be relatively low, but they can, one of the and the other, the cons, they can actually grow. It depends on the complexity. So let's move to the cons. The initial setup can be difficult, again, if you're deploying an advanced VPN solution, so the setup can be complex. Again, it can, the cost can scale up because of licensing or hardware costs for larger implementations, and and the complexity. Connection issues, there can be some connection issues. The VPN traffic sometimes is blocked in some public locations like hotels or libraries, and they mainly do this to limit, bandwidth usage because it can get out of control. If the DNS setting is not correctly configured for your VPN, it could actually slow down the end user's internet connection. Thank you, Abdul. All right, so that's VPN. Let's move on to desktop sharing. Desktop sharing solutions provides remote access either to an end user's desktop directly. So, from your office you have your desktop, and at home you can actually connect straight to your desktop. So that's a way. Another way is to have a remote desktop server. So you have a server in the main office, and when you are at home you connect to that server, and that's how you actually access the network resources. And that's usually called a terminal server. So, you can also have a, your organization can publish some applications so that, so that you can take advantage of those remotely. Moving on. So there's some different solutions around desktop sharing. The native solutions, you have a Windows remote desktop, like I was mentioning, terminal services. Apple also have a screen sharing solution. Those are considered native solutions because they're built into the operating system's platform. You also have some third-party solutions out there. Citrix, it's a good example of that. BNC, TeamViewer, PC Anywhere. Now, virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI, it's another way that you can actually allow your users to connect to the organization. So how does this thing work? So just kind of a quick overview of that is mainly you will have a server in your organization, either VMware or Hyper-V, Microsoft Hyper-V, and you will build virtual desktops on that host. So once you have those desktops, then you will open access to the different users. And so, they will either use the remote desktop connection or some other RDP tool or remote desktop connection tool to connect to those virtual desktops and work that way. So it can become very expensive. Again, you need a host, and that might actually add up to your cost, because if you want to have 50 BDIs host, on this big server, you need a lot of hardware to make that happen. So it can be expensive. BDIs are usually used in call centers or sales teams. So some of the pros and cons around BDIs, they're very easy to use. I'm sorry, on the desktop sharing overall, they're easy. These solutions are easy to use for the most part. They're mature. They're low maintenance. Low maintenance in terms of IT. If you have a terminal server, you can install all the applications that you want to make available to your users, and so you only have one server to manage, and you can have a better control that way. So that's an example of low maintenance. Some of the cons, again, the setup can be complex, like the VDI that I explained. The cost can be a little bit high because you need to pay for licenses, you need to pay for hardware, and it can have a big impact on your bandwidth as well. Depending on how many users are accessing your terminal server, for example, you might need to increase bandwidth or kind of beef up your server. All right, so moving on to the last most common remote access technology, it's the cloud, right? So you have nowadays you have people working anywhere from different devices at different times. So this has made using the different cloud options and applications very appealing to the users. All right, so one of the key selling points of cloud infrastructure is that they can be used from anywhere. These cloud applications can be launched from basically any browser. So, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, all you need is a device and an internet connection. Some of the most common cloud info systems are, Office 365, Google Apps, and they actually, provide access to, email capabilities, files, collaborations, Salesforce, Soho for CRM and databases. So those are kind of the most common ones. Some of the pros and cons for cloud. So clouds are very easy to use. Again, most of us are probably already using some of these Dropbox, Box, OneDrive. So they're very easy to set up as well. So they can be, they're scalable as well. Office 365, you have one user, you can have 25 users, you can add 100 users later. And, some of them can be lower cost, especially for nonprofits. Yes, some cloud vendors are offering nonprofit pricing. So, and there's no hardware support cost. Some of the cons, on the other hand, it's an evolving technology, so a lot of things are changing. So it's not as mature as the other two options that I have shown. I want to add though that they are moving out there, especially Office 365. If you use Office 365, you have probably seen a change in a maturity. It has reached a maturity level in this past year, 2 years, and now, for example, you can use it in different platforms. So I have a Mac and I use OneDrive. I edit documents on my Mac, so it's evolving. The other cons, recurring cost model. Again, there is a recurring cost associated to every user, and it can get expensive. There's multiple credentials. Again, that's kind of the downside. There are some single sign-on technologies out there, but that's again additional money to set those up. And if you work in another country, if the cloud system that you are using doesn't have geo redundancy, or they don't have different servers or different data centers around the world, it can be very challenging for other staff to to use cloud. It can actually be slow to access. All right. So moving on to communications. So we explore the different remote access methods. So what about communication? What type of communication solutions can you provide, or you have to look out for your users to work remotely and effectively? So chat, you have GChat, iChat, Link. So you wanna be sure to select the chat application that works for you, but keep in mind also to have it at an enterprise level so that you could control it better. Telephony, if you have a simple what's PBX? Thank you. A simple PBX box, you might have the option to forward your calls to your users' cell phones, and you can remotely kind of get your voicemail or retrieve your voicemail. So that's kind of a simple, right? But if you have, a more kind of advanced telephony technology, like VoIP, for example, there are a lot of things that you can do with that. Some of them already provide applications for mobile phones so that your remote users can use, their mobile phones to kind of make calls and not kind of advertise their personal phone number, stuff like that. You can have voicemail to email, so that's possible with VoIP. And you also want to have and keep in mind to kind of offer handsets for your staff, because that's going to provide a better sound quality for telephony. And then lastly, video conferencing. There's some desktop base, so you want to also be sure to provide your remote workers with applications to conduct meetings, and kind of have that video conferencing, because you want to have that face-to-face. If you have somebody working in California and you're here in DC, you want to be sure to regularly connect face-to-face. And so there's some different tools. There are desktop based. You have Skype. You have Link, Google Hangouts. You also have some other dedicated systems, and they are usually more expensive, and they require their own, AV hardware, like TV screens, cameras, speakers. So, some examples of those dedicated teams are, BlueJeans. I think Zoom. It's another vendor out there. You have Polycom, Cisco. So a lot of stuff out there for video conferencing. All right. So you already choose your remote access method or technology. You kind of already have a video conferencing, the tools that your people need. You already have all the communications tools that they need to kind of work effectively and remotely. Now, you also want to think about providing remote support, and these are some tools that you could use. But first of all, keep in mind that when you provide remote support to remote workers, that you're gonna be supporting different platforms. You're going to have different operating systems, so you might be supporting Windows machines, you might be supporting Apple or Mac OS or Linux, so you want to keep that in mind. You're going to be supporting different mobile devices and different applications, so keep that in mind when you kind of look for ways to support your remote users. And there's some tools to kind of help you facilitate this. There's some native tools with Windows, for example. You can use the Windows Remote Desktop Services or the Windows Remote Assistance. And then within Apple, you have the Apple Screen Sharing. There are also some third-party tools out there like GoToAssist, TeamViewer, some other browser-based. LogMeIn Rescue, and I think JoinMe. It's a free tool, and it generally works well. All right, so things to keep in mind, you know, what are some of the risks that you will encounter, you know, in all of this, and how can you manage these risks? All right, so around risks, you have, you know, data security risks. You might encounter, you know, data loss. Since, you know, because the data is cached in multiple devices, you know, you have an increased risk of data loss. You can also have some hacking risk, and, you know, increases the overall data security because, you know, the data can be targeted at different locations. Compliance and privacy risks. Some industries, you know, like such as healthcare, restrict access to client data. So remote access increases the chances that you know, compliance and private guidelines will be broken. So you need to keep that in mind also when you know, if you are in a healthcare, if you're a healthcare organization, there's some requirements that you have to meet when you deploy these remote access solutions. In terms of cost, you know, with massive adoption, you know, the supports are gonna go up. Your hardware, it's gonna go up. Your hardware costs, licenses. So keep in mind all of those things. All right. So how do you manage all these risks? Around security, I would say take in mind that there is a two-factor authentication with some of the cloud, especially, you know, some of the cloud technologies out there, like Google. I think Google and Office 365 offer a two-factor authentication. So this means basically that, you know, when you log into I don't know, to Google to get your email, you have, you know, they will give you a PIN code, or they will send a PIN or a code to your phone, and you have to enter that code in order for you to check your email or to check your Google Drive. So you know, so that's a way to mitigate the security risk there. Another way, it's the network access control system, to implement some network access control systems. The screen, you know, network access control system means that you have something implemented in your organization, in your environment, and this will screen every device that tries to connect and make sure that, you know, you have updated virus definitions and your operating system is patched before even allowing you to access the network resources. So that's, you know, that's a way to mitigate security. Also, you want to be sure that you have a password policy, and that this password policy, it's complex. You know, do you have a length and expiration date? You want to make sure that you prevent users from cache credentials. We do that here at Community IT for security reasons. We have, you know, a lot of technicians out there that uses our remote servers, and so we have actually, you know, prevent them from using cache credentials in our terminal servers. So that's a good way to manage, to mitigate risks. Restrict access from multiple devices, and, you know, monitor your remote access regularly. Okay, so it looks like we have a question. Please say more about what you mean by support tools. Support for what? The IT side or other areas? Yeah, it's basically the IT side. You know, if your user is having issues with connecting, you know, Outlook to the email server, you want to be sure that, you know, you can connect to his or her desktop to kind of troubleshoot the issue. So yes. All right. Standardization, it's another way to manage your risks. You wanna, if you know, whenever possible, I would say that you wanna, you know, you wanna provide the equipment and the software to your users, to your remote users, for easy management and better control. We have different staff. We have staff working in Georgia, in California. We have staff working in Texas and Philadelphia, and we have provided our desktops for them to work, and that is very. It works very well for us because we can remote manage those devices. And so we have a better control and management. We have our own monitoring system. We have our own antivirus. So, our risks for these remote workers are minimum in terms of accessing our data and using our network resources. So whenever possible, I would say, provide equipment to your users. It's gonna save you a lot of headaches. Remote management also, you can wipe data off devices when necessary. So if you have, somebody that is, that is leaving and you need to wipe the email and from their phones, you can do that. And you can also do things like set data to expire as a remote management solutions. All right, so we talk about risks. What about the best practices? What are some of the best practices for remote work solutions? Well, in general, I would say provide your users with how-to documents for remote access. So whatever your solution is, make sure your users know how to actually access these, these resources. That's very important. Make sure you have some strategies around bandwidth management, because depending on the solution that you implement, you might run into bandwidth issues. So if you have a terminal server and you have 50 concurrent users at the same time, that's not only going to slow down the usage of that terminal server, so you need to plan for a terminal server farm, maybe instead of only one server. You want to make sure you have enough bandwidth for that, enough hardware for that. So keep that in mind. Avoid caching credentials. We talk about that a little bit also. And again, use complex passwords and change them regularly. That's very important as a best practice, I would say. In terms of VPN solutions, be aware of DNS changes because again, that can slow down the end user web traffic. When you configure your VPN, separate if you have an office in Alabama and an office in DC, be sure you have different subnets for better management. Around desktop sharing solutions, set remote session display settings for low bandwidth environment, and what that means is, again, if you have a remote desktop server, you can do a lot of things, and one of the things to keep in mind to reduce hardware usage and bandwidth is, remote session display settings for low bandwidth environment, and or use certificates. SSL certificates, are very important. For security reasons. For cloud and browser-based solutions, customize your URL for signing onto applications. Use single sign-on systems to reduce multiple credentials when possible. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Abdul?
All right, thank you, Johanny. So you sat in on the webinar, and now you're ready to, make your case to your organization's board or to your management team to say, okay, look, I know what the benefits are. This, how it can help us. I sat in on the webinar, and I have some ideas on kind of potential remote work solutions. So how do you go about choosing those solutions? So the first thing you want to start with, and Johanny covered this in some detail already, is you want to start with the operating environment that your organization works in. So, for instance, are there compliance policies that restrict access to certain data? Are there industry standards that you have to kind of meet for accessing data? Like, do you have to audit every single access to certain data, that kind of thing? So that's the first thing you kind of have to put in consideration, kind of choosing a solution. Then the next is, what are your existing organizational policies? So, HR policies. So do you have any HR policies around, remote work? So are there policies that, only allow certain roles to be able to work remotely? Are there, will some of those policies need to change as a result of kind of what you're proposing? And then how does this fit into your your overall IT picture? So how does this affect your other IT policies? How does this affect acceptable use? So now you're giving you're handing laptops and mobile phones, etc., to your employees. How do you have to now update your acceptable use policies to extend to these devices you're handing over to them? And also, if you have a BYOD, bring your own device or mobile policy, how does kind of put in an official remote work policy? How does this kind of fit into the big picture of kind of your organization's IT? The next kind of consideration is costs. So are you going to pay for just the infrastructure, so the servers, the VPN solutions, the licenses, etc., or are you going to also provide end user equipment? These obviously have cost implications, so you would want to kind of plan for whichever route you plan to go. Then the most important part, obviously, of this exercise would be analyzing your needs. So what systems need to be accessed remotely? How often do they need to be accessed remotely? Does the solution need to connect field offices? Are you trying to facilitate collaboration? Do you want to provide, again, a new service or initiative that might give you a competitive advantage? So those are kind of some of the needs you need to kind of analyze. Once you've done that, you've analyzed your needs, then you need to really look at picking potential solutions. So you've identified your needs, you've come up with a budget, you've done your cost-benefit analysis for each solution. The next, kind of thing to consider is, what are the top 3 solutions that meet your needs? So you've done all your homework. You've put together your top 3 list. Now you need to present to your decision maker. So in some organizations, the IT director, the CIO, or the IT IT consultant might kind of have the final say on kind of on decisions. In other organizations, there has to be a more deliberate decision-making process. So whatever your process is, you really want to plan for that. So you've developed your budget. You want to include the first year costs, which is your deployment cost, as well as costs for growth, costs that also look at licensing subscriptions for future years. Those kind of things you really want to kind of put that into your budget. You don't want to just look at the now. You don't want to just look, okay, it's September 2014 and I want to deploy this by January 2015. What do I need? You really want to look at the near term and the midterm, the 2 to 5 year, 1 to 5 year, period. Then after you've done this, obviously to back up your need or your requests, you really want to outline some of the benefits. So with this new remote work, solution give you competitive advantage? Would it be used for remote training? Thanks. Someone just made a great point in the chat about remote tools can be used for remote training with coworkers or helping each other work on projects. So again, that's another great benefit is it can be used as a training tool. So are you using it for that? Is it going to increase employee morale? Because as we noted in that earlier statistic, a lot of U.S. employees really value working remotely. Are you going to make it a recruitment or retention tool where you're kind of letting potential candidates know that you have this benefit in your organization, or are you going to let current employees know that if they need to move because of the current situation, they can still work for you from elsewhere? And then obviously also, in addition to the benefits, you also want to outline some of the risks that we already covered, some of the financial risks, some of IT security risks, and how you plan to mitigate these risks. And then lastly, you want to have your implementation plan. So you obviously want to start with the beta tests, with the vendor you choose, some sort of demo or trial with a group that you've picked out. So you might pick out a group from every single division in your organization, or you might go by experience or IT skill level. You might have like beta test with where you have like the advanced group. You might have one person from the advanced group, one person from like kind of a middle of the pack, and someone who's maybe doesn't use technology so much and needs help a lot more. So you really want to have, because you want their input, and then that's going to feed into the final implementation. So after you've done your demo or your trial run, you really want to look at how soon can it be implemented. So will this solution be something where you might already have it in place, you just need to quote unquote turn it on? So for instance, if you're using one of those cloud solutions, maybe it's already available, you might need to tweak some things or configure URLs so people just go to your website /remote or something to get to the solution. And then when do you want to roll it out? So you definitely want to make sure you're looking at kind of your annual calendar. Do you have like an annual board meeting or annual conference where like everything gets really hectic? If you do, you want to look for a time that's really slow so that the implementation can be successful. And then at that point you've rolled out your solution. You obviously need to reevaluate solution every couple of years, putting in mind that there are things like organizational growth. There are new solutions that come up. You might have more funding and you can do more with your remote solutions, those kind of things. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. I know we went a bit fast in some sections, so I don't know if anyone has questions. We have just a little under 5 minutes, or just about 5 minutes for questions. And as Johan said in the beginning of the webinar, we're going to record this and make it available on SlideShare on our YouTube channel. So if there's anything that you missed or you want to review, you can always have the slides later. Obviously, you can, as I said, in this last few minutes we can answer any questions that anyone has. And thanks all those who contributed. The point about training is great. While we're waiting for questions,
actually,
I did want.
Abdul, we do have a couple questions. One question is with regards to VPN connections. One of the attendees was told by Comcast that their gateway routers do not allow access to a VPN, and the person asking the question wondered if we've run into that problem, and if anyone else out there has experienced that.
I've not run into. I mean, it is plausible that can happen where an ISP. One of Johanni's slides had one of the downsides of VPN being that is blocked in some public locations. I've not really heard of that kind of thing happening. It's a little bit. There are ways to test this. So there are ways to test if your VPN is blocked from your home. Whoever's asking this question, if you want like specific tools, I can. If you kind of I don't know. Leave your email with Johan or email us. I can send you kind of more. Basically, you can run a port test from your location to your destination server, and that port test will tell you if you get a response. That means your VPN tunnel is open. If you don't get a response, that means it's not. So that's kind of one easy way that you can test to see if your ISP or whatever location you're. I've not.
Yeah, there are a couple of interesting things on that question. So on the one hand, like the challenges with VPN, I mean, you're kind of at the mercy of the provider, that's providing you the connection, and for that reason, a lot of services have gone basically to what's called over SSL, which means you can set up a VPN system where the VPN tunnel gets established over just a normal what's known as SSL, which is when you go to a secure site like your bank's site, you'll see HTTPS up at the top, which means that all the traffic is encrypted. So that's one way of getting around that restriction, because Comcast is never going to obviously block secure HTTP traffic. So I think a lot of people have been going towards the SSL route. I think the other interesting aspect of the question is, what kind of, when you have a home worker or someone who's working from home, what kind of unusual problems are they going to run into because their ISP is blocking this, that, or the other thing? And I think that's a bigger problem that we run into. And I think Comcast in particular doesn't have a great reputation and will often kind of set things up in a way that makes it harder to access needed information. So it's always a good idea to kind of check what your options are. One of the attendees also sent us a link to a nice router. So we'll tweet that out from our Community IT Twitter account, but there's a router that you can get on Amazon that's Comcast compatible, and then you can potentially bypass those restrictions. So I'll be tweeting that out on the hashtag momentarily. And thank you very much for that suggestion. We still have a couple minutes. The other question that came up was sort of internationally, how do all of these suggestions carry over into other regions, other continents, other countries? And I think it really varies. In some places, internet connectivity is much better than it is here, and in other regions of the world, internet connectivity is much worse than it is here. And I think in places where it's not nearly as good as it is here, you really have to be mindful of that when you're thinking about tools for staff to use. And as far as I know, there's no way to kind of overcome a really bad internet connection. And in general, when you're working internationally, you want to get sort of the best internet connection possible in the region that you're in. So if there are no further questions, go to the next slide. Great. Just want to let everyone know that we're going to have another webinar next month. We'll be back to our normal Thursday at 4 o'clock time. It's going to be Thursday, October 23rd. It will be presented by Steve Longenecker and Matt Eshelman. They're going to be talking about IT security. And if anyone has been paying attention to the news in the last month, you'll know that IT security is kind of a continuing problem for celebrities, for Home Depot, but also potentially for nonprofit organizations. And we're all fairly familiar with some of the some of the basics around IT security. But with the advent of cloud, mobility, there are sort of a whole new breed of security best practices that we feel are important for nonprofit organizations to follow. So we're going to be covering those next month and kind of sharing those with you. So please don't forget to register, and please join us that month. And then finally, go to the last slide. Please connect with us after the webinar. We're on Twitter, Google+. You can go to our Facebook page. You can find us on LinkedIn. We will be sending you a link to a short survey. These webinars are something that we've been doing for about 2 years, and just really positive for us. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback about them. We want to make sure that they're geared towards the nonprofit community and are providing useful information and training for nonprofit organizations. So your feedback is critical to us and really helps us to keep improving these webinars. And finally, if you missed anything, if you had to duck out early, I guess you wouldn't be hearing this, but no worries. We're going to be sending you the slides and the recording. Our recordings and all of our previous webinars can be found on SlideShare and on our YouTube channel. You can find those by going to our website, www.communityit.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you or having you join us next month. Take care.